Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players, uncover their stories, and discover what makes them tick. If you love guitar, music, and the backstory of people's lives, stick around. You're in the right place. Hi, this is Craig. Just want to let you know you can now advertise here on Everyone Loves Guitar podcast. For more information, go to everyonelovesguitar.com/advertise. That's everyonelovesguitar.com/advertise. Hey, everybody, this is Craig Garber from Everyone Loves Guitar, and I am real pleased to be sitting with my guest today. He's just a phenomenal player. He's extremely talented in loads of different genres, and he's a real principled, ethical guy, and he's old like me, so I'm real happy to have Dave LeRoy Biller with us out of Austin, Texas. He is a guitar player, steel guitar player, and bassist, and yes, he gets paid for all three. He's, like I said, he's proficient in a wide variety of genres and sought after for all kinds of recording sessions and live gigs as a result. He's been on stage or in the studio with people like Ray Price, Jimmie Vaughan, James Burton, Billy Gibbons, Buddy Miller, Dave Alvin, David Grissom, who we had here a while back, Leon Rhodes, Buddy Emmons, just to name a few. And he's contributed and played sessions on hundreds of albums ranging in styles from heavy metal to blues, jazz, country, western swing, rockabilly, gypsy swing, and beyond. Man, heavy metal and western swing in the same sentence, let alone same dude playing sessions. That is pretty impressive, Dave.
Yeah, it's all the same shit. Just your amps turned at a different volume. That's about it.
No, I'll keep that in mind. He's originally from Michigan City, Indiana, and he was initially exposed to music through his dad and his teenage brother's records, primarily jazz and pop hits of the 60s, things like Stan Getz and Miles Davis, all the way up to Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. I can't speak today. All played on a child's Mickey Mouse phonograph. He was introduced to guitar by his granddad, actually, who was a railroad worker who moonlighted in a dance band on the weekends. You know, when you hear that, a railroad worker who moonlighted in a dance band on the weekend, that's like a man's man. You know, seriously, that sounds like so freaking macho. Like
he's from that generation. You know, he was born 1900.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like, he's not on Snapchat.
I should also mention. Yeah, right. Yeah,
putting ears on his pictures.
My grandmother also operated the switch when she was young too, and if back in those days, that was a serious heavyweight job, especially for a woman. Yeah. So my grandmother was no bullshit either.
That's awesome, man. Very cool. Dave started on viola lessons at age 7. But that was disrupted by a move with his dad to Clearwater, Florida, right down here. He took up drumming in the school band, but once again, he had some unstable family situations at home, and it made it difficult to continue. And he had to be transferred from school to school every few months. Eventually, he landed back in Indiana by age 12. And the spring of 1978, he was given a cheap K solid body, and an obsession began that lasts to this day. And this guy is really a great player. I can't emphasize that enough. It attended Indiana University in 1982, which has a tremendous music program, and had back then as well, because I know other people who've gone there. He happened upon a thriving music scene in Bloomington, Indiana, with many excellent guitarists and bands. While he was there, he taught, check this out, 70 students a week while performing in a variety of bands, and he acquired the skills he'd need to make a living as a full-time musician. Finally, in 94, he and his girlfriend, Karen, who's also a working musician, tied the knot, and they made the life-changing move to Austin, where they remain to this day. Since then, Dave's recorded and toured and gigged in every kind of situation imaginable, and he's played everything from the dingiest roadhouse bars to Madison Square Garden, where he performed at Eric Clapton's Crossroads Festival in 2013. He not only thrives as a musician, but he's also enlisted as a producer, teacher, and he's even composed original scores for film. He's currently involved. Check out all the projects he's in right now. A Western swing band where he plays steel and guitar. He has a wedding and corporate band where he plays bass, and they play Motown, Stax, 70s, funk and soul, pop, and current covers. He's in another rock band where he plays guitar that they play original music and covers. He's in 2 different Black Sabbath tribute bands playing bass, and he's in an Allman Brothers tribute band playing guitar. He's got his own jazz guitar trio, a traditional country band where he plays guitar and sometimes bass, an original heavy rock project which is stylistically similar to Free or early UFO. Do you bust out that black Gibson for that one?
I have another one for that.
Oh, that sounds.
I might play either one of them, but it's Les Paul and into a Marshall.
Yeah, man. I love Paul Kossoff and early UFO. And they just recorded an album. We'll get to talk about that. And he's also in an original rock and roll band headed by drummer and singer Hunt Sales, who was with Bowie's Tin Machine. He was with Iggy Pop, and he also played with Todd Rundgren. All this plus regular gigs he gets called for on a regular basis. And in his free time, he's writing a Shakespearean novel. No, I'm just kidding about that. Man, thank you so much. It's great to have you on the show. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Man, you're welcome. You know, it's funny. Hunt Sales, do you remember who his dad was, right?
Of course I do, yeah.
Soupy
Absolutely.
Sales. Isn't that funny, man? That's wild.
Man, has the same sense of humor, you know?
Does he? That's really cool, man. Yeah. Very cool. Hey, I'm just going to shut up for most of this, especially the first part, because you've got such a great breadth of experience, man. I'd love to just hear you tell stories. So let me start with recording on such a broad range of records as you had. Can you maybe pick 3 different sessions that you've played on and talk about, some cool, interesting, or funny experiences you had? And I have a suggestion here, one from metal, one from blues, and one from rockabilly or jazz, but honestly, whatever you'd like, that anything that, good, bad, or otherwise that sticks out that you want to share would be great.
Well, of course, a memorable one was my very first major studio experience, going into an actual recording studio with a band that I was in back in the 80s called Exit, back when I lived in Bloomington, Indiana. I was about 20 years old. And it was a full-on shred kind of band, like the guitar playing, And we recorded 2 full-length albums that neither of which were ever released. But we did release a 45 from one of those sessions. And it's still out there someplace. There's probably 500 copies of it, maybe. It's
nice.
Super rare. But it was really, it was memorable just because it was my first experience in the studio. We wheeled all of our Marshalls in there, and recorded all the basic tracks. And then I stood in the control room and just blazed through all the solos one after another. I don't think I ever listened to them before I went to the next one. I just thought that's how it worked,
Right.
And so that was fascinating and fun. But there was a couple of other sessions later on that were interesting. I did a jingle session with, and I walk in, and the other guitar player on the session is David Grissom.
Oh, wow.
One of my all-time favorite guitar players. And the producer of the session wanted us each to play a solo on this song, and that was going to be used for some commercial. And he said that he was going to pick whichever solo was worse. So I was like, well, I got this in the bag. Yeah.
That's kind of a weird thing to say. I'm going to pick which solo is worse.
It was weird, but then you'd have to know the guy that was producing this. He just tells you when what you played was shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He would pull no punches. So of course I played the worst solo. It's probably the only time in my life that I ever won by being worse at something. So I don't know if I should take pride in that or not, but
hey, a win's a win.
But it was fun. David was a lot of fun to work with in the studio, and we, talk the usual guitar nerd stuff, and also I don't know if it counts as a session. I didn't actually play much on this record, but I had a large hand in writing it. My one of my best buds. I played bass in his band for a few years. Was a guy named Nick Curran, and I don't know if you're familiar with Nick, but he was just, you know, just a universally regarded, incredible, you know, blues and rock and roll guitar player, and he was taken from us at the age of 35 from cancer, and but he and I had a lot of fun together, and you know, a typical thing with us would I call him up one day and I was like, Nick, what are you up to, man? Let's go to lunch. And he goes, oh, well, I can't. I gotta write songs for my record. And I'm like, oh, well, when do you start recording? Well, tomorrow. And I was like, okay. I was like, well, so how many songs do you have in the can right now? And he's like, well, I have part of one. And I was like, oh, Jesus, man. I was like, look, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna bring. I had this little cassette. Excuse me. I had this little cassette 4-track recorder. And he only lived like a few blocks from me. So I was like, look, I'll be over in 5 minutes. Let's write these damn songs. I just wanted to get him to write the songs so we could go eat lunch. So I go over there, and in about 3 hours, he and I wrote like 6 or 7 tunes, completely recorded the demos with him on drums and guitar and me on bass and rhythm guitar. And those became the songs that ended up on his Player album, which, you know, it was his, I think it was his second to last record, I believe. His last record, Reform School Girl, was like all over, you know, I don't know if you heard Steven Van Zant's Underground Garage radio show, but he was a huge fan of Nick and played the shit out of that record. But anyways, it's a sad thing about Nick. You know, you know, I don't know. He played with Fabulous Thunderbirds for a while, and I don't know. I can't say enough about the guy. We were close and did a lot of touring together, and I definitely miss him.
Sorry, man. Sorry for your loss.
Well, it was several years ago now, but you know, but still think about him every day, you know.
Sure.
But anyways, that was all I had written down here for experiences. You know, there's been zillions of recording sessions, and you know, they've I'm sure they were all interesting in their own way. Some of them maybe not so much, but I'm probably forgetting one that was like, oh, I should have talked about that, but
no,
know,
that's all good.
There's just too many.
You know, I just realized I probably gave you the same question twice, and then I said top 3 sessions you played on. It's kind of a redundant question unless you have a separate answer.
Well, one of the most interesting ones I did was I got called to play this session, and he says, the guy that calls me says, well, we just want you to play rhythm guitar. And I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. You know, I usually don't get called just to play rhythm guitar, but that's cool. And I show up to the session, and the lead guitar on the session is James Burton.
Holy crap.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, now I understand. Right. And, but it was awesome. You know, James is one of my all-time favorite, one of my biggest heroes, you know, and we got along great, had a ball playing together. And the funny thing was that the type of song it was really more my bag than his. It was like kind of a jazzy thing, you know, that needed more kind of like a Charlie Christian type guitar solo. And James just kept saying through the session, he's like, oh, Dave should be playing lead on this. You know, this is silly, you know. But honestly, what he played was fantastic. It was wonderful and right in the bag, but it was still him, you know. It was beautiful. But that was a really fun day in the studio.
Yeah.
The kind of thing that you don't ever forget about, you know.
Do you find that, like, it seems like to me, whether it's business, guitar players, or anything, the guys at the higher end of the food chain are always so much more likely to say, hey, man, why don't you do this? Because just like what he, you know, and then it's the guys who are like, you know, kind of maybe insecure or competitive, or like, you know, they want to make sure they get it.
No. I think guys like James Burton, you know, he's been in the studio with everyone from, Glenn Campbell and Barney Kessel and all the Wrecking Crew guys. And also, Merle Haggard sessions or Buck Owens, with playing with other great guitar players like Roy Nichols or Don Rich. Those guys would all defer to each other. They all had a very friendly, environment that they played in. Hey, why don't you play on it? Oh, I like what you did. Why don't you play on this? And James told me how, they would divide up the parts sometimes, and nobody ever had any kind of ego, like I was going to play the lead on this or whatever, So I think that just kind of carries over with younger guys that he works with, like myself.
Yeah.
He was super gracious about it, and we jammed together in the studio while they were messing around in the control booth trying to make decisions, and he and I just noodled around, playing tunes together, and he was just super great, complimentary and encouraging, and it was a really nice day.
That's awesome, man.
Sometimes you meet your heroes and they're not up to what you expect, and frankly, some you may just be complete assholes, So it was very refreshing to talk to James Burton,
That's cool, man.
And there's been a few others been like that.
You've played in a lot of different venues, as I mentioned, like from little roadhouse places to the Garden. What were the best and worst venues you've played in, and why were they so good or bad?
Well, interestingly, like the best and the worst venue were both the same one.
Interesting.
So,
yeah.
So, obviously Madison Square Garden was enormous. I mean, I don't mean size. I just mean in stature, and, that was just an unbelievable, incredible experience. Even just standing backstage and, looking down the runway, where the limos drive up, and just realizing that's the last scene and Song Remains the Same,
Yeah.
That stuff, Jimmy Page stood right here, and I, just that whole experience was incredible. Everywhere I turned, I look one way, there's Keith Richards. I look the other way, there's Vince Gill or Warren Haynes or Derek Trucks or somebody, I couldn't look anywhere without seeing some incredibly famous, huge guitar player, and I felt like an idiot being there, to tell you the truth, but but it was also the worst sound on stage I've ever heard in my life.
You're kidding.
No, and it's funny because I've read in some rock star bios where they talk about, Madison Square Garden being notorious for having awful sound acoustics. If you think about it, it's a gigantic gymnasium,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a basketball arena.
Literally, yes.
Yeah. So, and it has the same acoustics as like a high school gym, except times 10. So you can put 25,000 people in there, and they don't do anything to absorb the sound that's bouncing off of that dome-shaped roof and everything. So it was kind of miserable to play in there. And as a matter of fact, my experience there was challenging because on that show I was featured on one song, and things went wrong like almost immediately at the beginning. So there was like confusion very early on in the song, and aside from like the random acoustic slapback that you were getting off of back walls and stuff, in combination with the following band that was testing their instruments, their crew was at full volume while we were playing. So the drummer can totally hear the drummer sitting right behind him,
Oh my.
Yeah. So there was all this cross interference from the music being played by the next band. And at a quiet moment in my tune, something got screwed and the beat got flipped around on the song. So the whole rest of the tune was just like everybody trying to figure out what the hell's going on. It was
that's too bad.
kind of a catastrophe. So, but I thought well, this could go two ways for me right now. I'm out here in front of the stage at Madison Square Garden, standing here where Jimmy Page stood 40 years ago, and I could either just lose it and just crumble into a quivering ball of useless flesh, or I could just suck it up and just power through the thing and try to look like a professional. So that's what I did. And, nobody came up to me and said, oh my God, what happened? Everybody acted like they didn't know any different,
Yeah.
And, but whatever, I knew it was a wash, but it didn't really do that much to ruin the entire overall experience for me, which was, really wonderful and fantastic. I can't believe I was there,
What song were you playing on, and how did you get invited to Clapton's Crossroads event? How was the connection?
It was kind of a fluke.
No, wait a minute. You don't get invited.
No, really, it was kind of happenstance in a way, because I was playing at Jimmie Vaughan's birthday party, and it was he had his party at this remote restaurant way outside of a small Texas town called Fredericksburg. I mean, there's just nothing out there,
Mm-hmm.
And so I happened to be playing in like three or four different bands, and all different kinds of things. I played with a rockabilly band there, and I played in an organ jazz trio there, and I did a thing backing up a jazz singer, just myself. And the whole time I look over and Eric Clapton is standing there in the door, kind of in the doorway, leaning against the door jamb, just watching the whole thing. He was like watching all the bands, and I was told that somebody was going to be there, but I kind of figured it was going to be Billy Gibbons, and indeed he was there, but that's not who they were talking about. It was Clapton. And Jimmy didn't want to make a big deal out of it, because that's how he is, So anyway, so after the whole thing's over, I'm packing my gear up, and this guy taps me on the shoulder from behind. He goes, "Excuse me, Dave, hello, I'm Eric." I was like, holy crap. Well, yeah, I know you're Eric. So we had a really, really nice chat for like a half an hour, just talking about music and guitars and stuff. And he was super cool and friendly. And it was great. And then I didn't think anything more of it. And then about a month later, I get an email from his personal manager saying that they want my physical address because Eric has something that he wants to send me. And I'm thinking, oh my God, he's going to send me a guitar.
A guitar, yeah, man.
Send me he's going to give me Blackie or something, So I didn't know, I had no idea. So eventually the thing comes to my house, and it's actually a personal handwritten letter from Eric asking me if I would be interested in playing Crossroads Festival. And my immediate reaction was like, good Lord, no. Like, I can't do that. Yeah. I've seen these Crossroads things. Like, what the hell am I going to do? But they worked it all out. And of course I didn't refuse to do it. It was an incredible opportunity. And, it was really Jimmy that made that happen for me, because,
wow. But dude, that's not a fluke. That's like serendipity.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, that's Eric Clapton asked you. That's not a fluke, Dave.
Well, it was super cool.
That was awesome, man.
How it happened, and but a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that I actually played with Clapton at the thing. I did not, but
man, what an honor. That's so cool, man. It really
was. I mean, they sent me a big poster, and they my name's on it right between Jeff Beck and Booker T, and I realized they put everybody's name on there in alphabetical order, right? So,
okay. Hey man, that's really a wonderful thing. I know you're like a self-deprecating guy and you're super humble, but that is, that shit. Clapton invites you to his party. to play at his event. That says a lot about what you're doing on the guitar, whether you like it or not.
at least what I did that day.
Yeah. Hey man, more important, how do you get an invitation to these Jimmie Vaughan birthday parties? That's
a whole other thing.
Oh my God.
Jimmy and I just, I don't know. We just, we met. He showed up at some gigs I was playing, and we just kind of hit it off. We both. He says he likes me because I'm like him, because we're as he puts it, we're anti. So, like, to him, that means we're just anti everything. You know what I mean? He's probably a little more anti than I am, but I get what he means. It's kind of just kind of an old school mentality, and a low tolerance for baloney.
Man. Yeah,
and that's kind of how Jimmy is. But we just kind of hit it off, and we have a lot of fun, like, messing around with guitars and just talking about music. We're both fans of Lawrence Welk.
That's funny.
Yeah. We sit around watching videos of the old Lawrence Welk show with Buddy Merrill, and Neil Levang on guitars, and we both just geek out over that stuff, So
that's funny, man.
Yeah. Anyways,
we talked about Clapton, but for these guys, and you can pick somebody else if you want, talk about how you got the gig working with them, and maybe a cool or interesting story about the experience. And Billy Gibbons, Dave Alvin, and you could pick somebody else because we already went through Clapton.
With Billy Gibbons, he didn't hire me to play or anything. We just ended up on the same show together, which is really cool. I used to play in this organ trio. An organ player named Mike Flanagan in town here.
Sue Foley.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sue, and also he'd become Billy's kind of right-hand guy on a lot of stuff, helping him out with playing bass on his tours and organ and stuff. And Billy G is really kind of taking a shine to Mike, and he loves organ jazz and soul, So he was coming up to our gigs pretty regularly. And one night, after a few times, I finally talked him into sitting in with us. And he ended up having a ball, of course, But Mike released a really great album called The Drifter, and had a lot of different people on it. I actually played pedal steel guitar on the record. That was it. But he put together a big show to kick off the record release at the Paramount here in Austin. And he got Mr. Gibbons on the show, along with some other incredible players. Charlie Sexton was on the show, and Derek O'Brien on guitar, another local blues legend. And it was just an incredible band, and I couldn't believe I was on that gig with all these guys, but it was great. But, so that's kind of how that happened,
That's nice.
Yeah. And,
you guys that's such a supportive, a very close community over there in Austin.
It really is. It's music wise, it's kind of almost like a small town kind of a thing. There's a million people here, and we're being overrun with developers and the usual crap, but there's still our tight knit little music community, and some of the people that have gone on to do really great things, like Jimmy, and maybe like Eric Johnson and Gary Clark, they're all still a part of this small community. We run into all these guys at the music stores and guitar shop, and, we shoot the shit and trade war stories and stuff. It's a very small, tight community, and it's really cool.
That is cool. Do you know Denny? I'm sure you know Denny Freeman.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, I had him on the show. He alluded to some of the similar stuff.
Yeah, he and I are good friends too. He's a super guy.
Yeah.
He has no idea how much I think of him, if I tell him that, he's
you guys are similar like that. You're both very resistant to accolades.
Yeah, we don't take praise very well.
Yeah.
None of us,
Yeah.
anyways, Denny also plays the steel guitar too, so we talk about that a lot.
That's right. He spent a lot of time talking, because that's kind of a newish thing for him, isn't it? Like, he's kind of obsessed with it, but
but he's very good at it. He doesn't think he is, of course, but he is. He plays some. Last couple times I've seen him play it, he didn't know I was there one time, and the other time he happened to catch me out of the corner of his eye, and he was mortified that I was there. And I was like, "No, man, you're playing some really cool stuff,
Sure.
As if I'm any kind of authority on what's cool, But, he, if it wasn't cool, he wouldn't be playing it. That's for sure.
I know, he's a tremendous player, man.
Yeah.
So talk about Dave Alvin.
I haven't seen Dave in a long time, but we did this really fun tour together back in the mid '90s. It was a bunch of artists on the High Tone label, and I was playing back in those days. I was playing in the band of a guy named Dale Watson. He was a pretty well-known country singer who established the whole Ameripolitan thing. But back in the early 90s, I was playing in guitar in his band, and we did this tour, and they took Dale and I out of his band, and then we used a couple of guys from Dave Alvin's band to back us up, and then I ended up playing in a couple other bands as a backup, like with Buddy Miller, just strumming acoustic, and there were a few other people on that tour. But Dave was he was a lot of fun, and it's just a super cool guy. We found out that he was born not too far from where I was and stuff, and
that's cool.
He didn't grow up there, but the only kind of humorous story I have about that whole trip is that I don't remember the exact circumstances, but there were a lot of people piled onto this bus, and Dale and I were put back in the lounge. Mm-hmm. That's where we slept, and I got on the bus kind of late after carousing around town after a gig, and the bus was getting ready to leave, and I go, and the door was locked to the lounge. I'm banging on the door. Hey, open up! I want to go to bed. Go away. All right, so I couldn't get in. So I just took my jacket and whatever I had. It was wintertime, and we're up in like Minnesota or something, and I curled up on like the little lunch counter thing, whatever. I can't think of the name of it right now, but I'm talking about the
the bar.
Yeah, where you just a little table with 2 bench seats that you sit at.
Yeah, just a booth.
Yeah, just a little dining booth,
Yeah.
So, the thing's like 3 feet long, and I'm all curled up on this thing, freezing. In the middle of the night, I feel this blanket come over me and like being tucked under me, like I'm being tucked in. And I look up and it's Dave Alvin.
Man, how cool is that? What a nice guy.
I can come out and say that I was once tucked into bed night by Dave Alvin. So
that's funny. Was Smokey Hormel his guitarist on that tour?
No, he just he played his own guitar.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great, man. And do you want to pick somebody else since we went through Clapton?
I can't think of anybody right now. I'm sure that
that's cool.
There's a lot, nothing that interesting, but anyways, yeah.
So what prompted you and Karen to move to Austin in '94?
Well, it was a kind of a no-brainer for me, I was basically just biding my time in Bloomington. This is Bloomington, Indiana, where we both went to college at different times. I was just waiting for her to finish her degree so then we could go somewhere. And she knew that she didn't want to stay in Indiana, and I definitely didn't want to. I had been ready to leave for 10 years. Oh. But we kind of looked at different places, where we thought we might want to go to pursue our respective careers in music, and she was the sensible one. She had a business degree and, was ready to like take a real job and stuff. We both had to for a while,
Sure.
But, we looked at New York and Los Angeles and even like Nashville and New Orleans, even, but I think we knew that Austin was going to be the place, I mean, it was far enough south. It was warm, the music scene was incredible when I first got here, and there really was no decision to be made. We went and checked out the other places. We were like, I mean,
Nashville had the vibe. You felt more at home there. I mean, sorry, not Nashville. Austin had more of a homey vibe that you felt there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I like hanging out in Nashville. It's actually a lot of fun.
It is.
Los Angeles too, but Austin just felt like a place where I could like live the rest of my life, And I'd been thinking about it for years and years. Bloomington was a little bit like Austin in a lot of ways when I first got there. It had a thriving, it was much smaller scale, but it had this really great music scene. There were some wonderful players around, really great bands, and a lot of them ended up here at different times. Some of them went back, some of them stayed, and a couple went to Nashville. And they've done all right too. But I think if Nashville, I think the guys I knew that went there ended up playing with like big touring acts, like
yes,
like Steve Earle or somebody like that,
And you really wanted to do your own thing.
Well, I was okay with playing with a big act too, but they didn't really have that kind of thing here, I really just wanted to play the kind of music that I wanted to play, which at that time was anything kind of roots oriented and old school. I wasn't really I was kind of out of playing rock at that time. I figured I was going to make my living playing jazz gigs, like playing standards and casuals and stuff like that. But I ended up it took me like 8 years to get a jazz gig here, because I kind of underestimated how thriving the jazz scene was in Austin and how great the players were. I wasn't ready for that because I came from Bloomington and Indianapolis, which was just full of ridiculously awesome players. And well, the only place I can go that's going to top this would be New York, but I was wrong. I came to Austin and I was floored by how talented everybody was. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, but with the proximity of UT and North Texas,
North Texas is a big feeder for that.
Yeah, exactly. So, but anyways, Austin was the place,
And it's funny, those, the cities haven't changed much. It's still Austin, Los Angeles, Nashville. New York is fading. There's a scene there now. There's a lot of bluegrass guys in New York, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And but it's the session work scene is really dried up there. So it's still pretty much the same locations.
Pretty much.
Would it be possible for you to pick like overall the top 3 experiences you've had musically, either because of the work you've done or just the hang or the vibe?
Well, certainly that Crossroads would be pretty close to the top of the list, I would say, if not the top, just because, it was like, not only did I get to live like a rock star for 3 days, and, walking out in the hallway of my hotel and seeing Jeff Beck, standing there or whatever, it was that was probably the most amazing thing. That's the only time in my life I've ever felt like that. Some of these guys, that's no new thing for them at all. It's just, that's every day. But, for me to go down in the lobby and, I went to the pre-party. I went to the pre-party for the Crossroads thing. That was pretty amazing too. They had it at the Hard Rock in Times Square. And I was standing at the bar, like I wasn't drinking or anything, but I was standing at the bar and I looked to the left of me and there is Steve Cropper and Robert Randolph. And then I turned to my right and there's Alan Holdsworth and Kurt Rosenwinkel having a conversation.
Crap.
These guys were standing on top of me, and I just like, they're everywhere, you know? So it was,
Did you
yeah,
did you meet
across the
anybody?
bar, there were more of them.
Did you get to talk to Pete? Like, did you talk to Jeff Beck or anybody new that you hadn't?
I didn't get to meet Jeff Beck. You know, I'm kind of shy when it comes to celebrities. I don't like coming off as like a, you know, like a starstruck geek or anything like that, you know. But, you know, I think Robert Cray's dressing room was next to ours, so I met him. You know, when I think back on it, I didn't really meet too many people, but a couple people of note that I did meet that I really, really liked as people. One was Taj Mahal. Man, what a brilliant mind that guy is. He is really, really bright and smart and really fun to talk to. Just knowledge of everything, man. And also, when we took the shuttle back to the hotel, I was sitting in a seat next to Derek Trucks and Susan Tedeschi, who are just two really, really sweet, wonderful people. And Derek is just as nice as he could be, and, you know, he gives you a good feeling when you talk to him. And now a couple of my good friends are playing in his band now, so which is really cool. So
that's nice.
So yeah.
And okay, so Crossroads was one.
Yeah. Oh boy. I'm gonna have to think about this for a minute.
Man, you got some interesting tattoos there on your hand, like that 7-4. I've never seen. You don't see tattoos on.
We can get to that later when you talk about outside interests.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
You know, because that's a whole other story. You know. But I can't think of any other like experiences that are that interesting. You know,
Sure.
There's been a lot of like really great things. You know, like you know, playing with Ray Price was a big deal for me. You know, and you know, Ray was at a very late stage in his career, and the thing is, I was playing pedal steel with Ray Price. And,
oh wow!
As a pedal steel guitarist, to me, that was the number one greatest thing I could possibly have done with the steel guitar, was to play behind Ray Price. You know, those were the records that I learned to play steel guitar from, you know, and, you know, playing even just I played 2 gigs with him, but just playing a single job with him, regardless of how it went, you know, which they went fine. But I mean, that was just a huge deal for me. You know, it'd be like if, you know, you got a gig playing like, you know, George Harrison's part in the Beatles or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You were hired to cover for, you know, that's how I felt covering for Buddy Emmons or Jimmy Day or one of the other great players that have sat in that chair in the incredible, you know, 60-year history of that guy and his band. You know, it was a really, really big deal. You know, it was like, you know, getting to play a Beethoven symphony with Beethoven conducting the symphony, you know. So
you're is it a fair statement if I say you really seem like a very astute like student of everything musically related, everything that you're doing, like your awareness and observation powers are like kicking in pretty continuously. Is that a fair statement?
I would say that's fair. Yes.
Yeah.
When it comes to music, really anything, I don't screw around, man. I dive into it head first, and I'm a bit obsessive when it comes to that, you know, like if you know, if I decide like I want to play country guitar, the next day I'm out shopping for a Telecaster and I'm buying 100 records. You know what I mean? I'm consuming as much material as I possibly can, you know. And if I decide, well, now I'm going to play blues, I don't just listen to one Stevie Ray Vaughan record and say, okay, now I'm a blues player.
Yeah.
I start diving into the history of all of it. I start, okay, this is, you know, T-Bone Walker and Johnny Guitar Watson here, and then I need to study Chicago blues, so I listen to Robert Jr. Lockwood and Lewis Myers in these guys, and then you got the Texas thing, so I listened to Albert Collins. You got Memphis thing, so I better listen to Albert King and BB. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I study the different facets of all of them, and I read as much material as I can, not instruction, more history. I want to know where it comes from. I'll start, making my way back to the beginning, back through Elmore James and Robert Johnson and Son House. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm never satisfied just skimming the surface of something. So
sorry, I didn't cut you off.
No, you didn't.
It's a good lead in actually to the next question, which is you in school, you taught 70 students a week, right? And right now you're involved in 8 different projects. And then we just went through, what your learning process sort of looks like. So to me, it's obvious you've always been a hustler and you got a great work ethic, which I think to me, that's almost for me the number one, or has become one of the number one ways of evaluating someone as a human being, because most of the time when you have a good work ethic, other good traits typically follow that. Like if you're a lazy ass, it's the opposite. You know what I mean? It's the opposite. Like usually a lot of bad traits follow that. Where did this come from? What makes you so driven beyond a paycheck, of course, that you're going to get? Because I know it's got nothing to do with that.
Well, some would just say that I'm just obsessive compulsive. Like, there's definitely elements of that there. And as far as anything that I've inherited from my parents or grandparents, really the only thing I can think of is just that my parents and my grandparents were both from kind of an older generation. I came along really late. My parents are older than most of my contemporaries' parents, and my grandparents are older. I was born in 1963, but my mom and dad were born in the 20s, and my grandparents were born around the turn of the century. And those people every one of them all lived through the Depression and stuff. They just have a different way of doing things, and it's it's kind of more of a definitely like a blue collar kind of family that I come from. Everybody worked like labor type jobs. And like my oldest brother was a Vietnam veteran, and he worked as a mechanic and a railroad mechanic and stuff. And my other brother worked in the steel mill, where he just retired. My brothers are quite a bit older than me too. So, so I don't know, maybe it just comes from that. I didn't get a whole lot of specific guidance when I was younger, like in how to do something.
Sure.
It's more just do it or learn. If you don't know how to do it, then learn. You got to take initiative. And when I was younger, I definitely was lazy for sure. I was a typical teenager and didn't want to do anything. And it took me a lot of years to realize, how I screwed up that part of my life. I could have done more if I would have been a little more on the ball back then. I was a little bit defiant about it, So as far as what my work ethic became, I think a lot of it just was a desperate need to not have to do that, to take a job that I would just work at until I retired, and it was never about money for me. When I learned, kind of like when I decided to play guitar, it didn't have anything to do with picking up girls or anything like that, or being a rock star. I just loved the way the instrument looked and sounded,
Yeah.
And that was all it was for me.
I'll give you credit because that's, it seems like you've been super consistent about busting your ass since day one, which is awesome, I think, man.
Well, to me, it doesn't feel like work if you're really, loving it. You know what I mean?
Well, it's not a grind. It might be work, but it's not a grind. Yeah, I totally get that.
It's like, I enjoyed every minute of the learning process, and discovery,
Yeah,
that's what makes it all fun for me.
You're originally from Michigan City, Indiana. Where is that? And like, what kind of a town is that? Is that like rural, city? Or?
No, it's not far from Chicago. It's almost like a suburb. It's crammed up there in the northwest corner, kind of between the Illinois and the Michigan border, right around the edge of the lake there. And it's different than the rest of Indiana. They called us in college. They called us region rats. We're from the region. So everything I saw on TV, culturally and by proximity, all kind of filtered in from Chicago.
Okay.
So, I got all the Chicago TV stations. So, and the cities are all like one's next to the other. We're like very close to like Gary, Indiana. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that is probably one of the most godforsaken places on earth.
Really?
It's also spawned the Michael Jackson, so
that's right.
But my dad was actually born there, but so, it's kind of, growing up around that area, I had access to the city, and everything it had to offer, culturally and stuff. Although I didn't really get to experience that until later on, when I was a teenager,
So you more of a city guy or a small town guy then?
Well, most of my family is all farmers, so I really enjoyed like going out on farms and stuff, but there's only one time in my life that I ever lived like that, and I hated it.
So you're more of a city guy.
I'm definitely more of a city guy for sure. And, I was just a kid when we lived out in the country, but I really hated it. I was just bored out of my skull, and it was uninteresting, and there was just nobody around,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What was your childhood like? And if you're comfortable sharing, and if you're not, that's totally
Absolutely.
Cool. It sounds like, you had some instability or there was some shit going on with your dad. What happened there?
Well, it wasn't really just my dad, but he it was the 1960s. It was it was a rough time for a lot of people, especially if you had sons who were of age to be drafted, which is what happened to my oldest. Both my brothers were drafted.
Oh, wow.
One was a little bit younger, and he managed to miss like the worst part of Vietnam and didn't end up having to go. But my older brother did. And he went into the service like right around the time of the Tet Offensive and all, just the worst imaginable time in history that you could be in the service, especially if you were like him, a guy who was more of a pacifist and did not believe in any of that at all, So anyway, so it made for some turmoil in the house. I was very young at the time. I was just starting kindergarten and stuff, so I was kind of unaware of all the adult drama that was going on around me at the time. But my mom and dad ended up getting a divorce around 1970. And my dad remarried a woman with two daughters that were roughly my age. So during the summer, he moved to Florida with them, and I went down to kind of spend the summer with them. I think between maybe after third or fourth grade. I think after third grade. So at the end of the summer, I was given the option to stay, and because even as a child, I absolutely despised winter, and the idea of staying in Florida where it'd be warm all year, I could play baseball all year. I love the idea of it. So I was like, okay, I'll go to school here this year, and then in the summer I'll go back, and keep in mind, I'm like 8 years old. I'm being left to make these decisions on my own, So what do you want to do? Like, how the hell do I know? I'm 8, But,
yeah, I know.
But, I just knew I liked summer and I like to swim and it stays summer here all year.
Sure.
Okay, I'm staying here then, So in Florida is a vacation when you're a little kid,
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, I'm going to be on vacation for the rest of my life if I stay here. So,
That's cute what you're saying, because that is how little kids think.
Yeah. So, I mean, swim in January? Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
Hell
fishing, swimming, baseball. Yeah.
Yeah. So I stayed, and it turned out not to be a great decision on my part. But even at that age, I felt like I had committed to something, and I felt like I didn't have any way out of it at the point. It really did not work that well. After the first year of it, things were definitely starting to go south. My stepmother, everybody has it's a cliche to talk about the wicked stepmother or whatever, but this woman absolutely despised me. Okay. I was kind of, I grew up basically as an only child. Now I have to share everything with these 2 sisters. And I wasn't emotionally equipped to do that yet. So there was a lot of problems, and I was looked at as a kind of an entitled brat, I guess, So
wow, you know what? That's so amazing, because I mean, I don't know you from anywhere, but like, that would probably, like, if I had to pick a list of 20 adjectives to describe you in the small context we've had together, that one was on there, that would probably come out at the bottom.
Well, that's how I was perceived.
Yeah, right.
Whether or not I actually was, I certainly was not in any way spoiled, not in any way, shape, or form, Yeah. But, I got attention when I lived with my mom because I was the only child, so I didn't have to share the spotlight with anybody. And also, I was, I don't want to say I was never abused or anything like that. It was nothing like that. It was more just a bit of a mind game sometimes,
Which is unfair for an 8-year-old to have to play.
Yeah, I mean, it was just subtle things like, like one year at Christmas, my stepsister's grandparents, not their mom's parents, but their dad's parents. So, they hated both my stepmother and my dad, and they came down just for the girls. And, Christmas comes and they buy these girls bicycles for Christmas, completely ignoring me, which now, today, what do I care, but when you're you're an 8-year-old kid, you're left out in the cold, and that can like put you in a bad place. Yeah. You're a child, so, but to my dad's credit, he made it right. Yeah, I know he hated it. It pissed him off that he got put in that position. But, he took me to Kmart and we picked out a bicycle for me. So,
that's good.
He was forced into the situation of having to buy me a bike, but he did it. I give him credit for that. So, but.
Is he still down here? Is your dad still around?
My dad is still alive, and in an incredible twist of the story, skip ahead, 40 years later, my dad is married for a 3rd time. He got divorced, must have been 1974 or 5 or something like that. A couple of years later, he remarries again, stays with the same woman for a long time. And she was older than him, and she passed away. So my dad, not really having any place to go at that point, there were some financial issues with a business that he owned and stuff. And, there was some financial stuff, the details of which I don't really know, but he was in a bit of a pickle. And my mom ended up taking him in. My mom never remarried.
Wow.
So they live together, and they're spending their twilight years just as kind of acquaintances. You know what I mean?
There's
nothing else there except they just kind of look out for each other, which isn't saying much because my mom's 90 and my dad's going to be 92 next month. So, neither of them can do very much, but they're there to kind of just keep each other company when my dad's not sleeping. That is, he sleeps a lot. So,
and they're both in Michigan City.
They're both still in Michigan City. In
wow.
The house my mother bought right when I was finishing junior high school. My mom still has the same house. So, basically the house that I finished my early adult years in before I went to school,
Holy shit. How crazy is that?
Yeah.
That's wild. But you know what? At least they're together. And, you probably worry a lot less about them collectively, though, knowing that the two of them are together and they're not fighting and they're at least, Well,
I wouldn't say they're not fighting. My mom gets annoyed with them for sure. But, it's easy for me to deal with when I go home because I only have to go to one place. I can hang out with both of them at the same time.
Yeah.
And we all do stuff together, So I've enjoyed the situation that they've had, and I think it's worked out pretty well in spite of the differences that they may have. My mom and dad are very, very different people,
That's wild.
I have aspects of both of them for sure. And I took a lot of personality and habitual traits from my father that my brothers just never did. So I became kind of the black sheep in that respect.
Wait, so you and your wife been together a long time, just as long as my wife and I have been together. Do you guys similar or different personalities?
We're pretty different from one another in a lot of ways, but I think what makes it work for us, besides the fact that we're both musicians, is that we both have we have the same kind of philosophical vision. You know what I mean? We have the same views on religion and politics and the idea of kids and stuff which we've never had. So it was just not in the cards for us, and we're comfortable with that. So it's we both like a lot of the same things, and then there's other things that we have different, which I think is healthy. You don't want to do everything together. We're not a lot of the dance halls and stuff that I play in, you'll see these couples that come in, they're always wearing matching shirts and stuff.
Yeah, that's a bit much. Do you have similar musical interests?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We're both metalheads,
That's
even if neither of us played, even when neither of us were playing in any kind of a rock band, we were both mostly just playing country gigs and stuff like that. When Iron Maiden comes to town, we're there. Judas Priest comes to town, we're there. We both get excited about it, and we love going to big, rock concerts together, especially bands that are still together that we listened to when we were younger.
Sure. Yeah, that is cool to do that. I like doing that myself.
In fact, when I first met her, me and my friends used to call her the heavy metal chick because she always wore a leather jacket and she looked tough and had wild hair and everything.
That's awesome. That's good, man. Very cool. That's a good story, man. Well, I'm glad it all worked out for you and for your parents too.
Yeah.
Seemed like it kind of had a happy ending. It wasn't like, it was temporary chaos, it seems like.
Yeah, there was a chaos that went on for about 5 years for me. And didn't really become stable until after I, like I said, we told you before, we moved around a lot when I lived in Florida, even ended up in Kentucky for a while.
Oh my God.
Which was a disaster. And we ended up going back to Florida, just me and my dad. So we moved. There was a period of time when, at some point we were living in Clearwater, Florida. I was still in school, and we were going to make this move to go to Kentucky to live with my stepmother's mother. She had a really big house. And so my stepmother and the two stepsisters, they went to live there for a while my dad stayed behind in Florida and got things situated. And I stayed with him. And that was, in my youth, I don't know what the timeline was on that. It might have been 2 weeks. It might have been 3 months. I don't remember how long it was. I don't think it was, I want to say it was about a month. But that was just complete chaos in my life. That was when I was like, my dad made sure I got fed every day, but he was a combination of some business stuff he was working on, and then partying.
Yeah.
I think, I just didn't see him very much, so I was kind of on my own to do whatever, and by this time I'm like 11, 12 years old, so.
Yeah, but still, that's the early 70s, and there was some that was generally wilder times.
I will have to apologize to my mother if she actually listens to this podcast. I don't know that she will, but
if you tell her, she will. I promise you, because they all do.
I've told her, much later. I've told her about some of the really horrible things that I've done when I was younger, and my mom adores me. I'm the baby, and she still calls me the baby. And I don't ever want to burst her bubble about that, but she has to know that I wasn't always such an angel. During that time when I was kind of free to my own devices, I had some friends that were older than me. We were smoking weed. 11 years old. I'm smoking. This was I don't know if you've lived in Florida your whole life, but
no, I'm from the Bronx, so whatever you're telling me is going to be mild compared to what I did.
Okay.
To be really honest with you,
I'll tell you what, Florida in the 1970s, Central Florida, might as well have been the Bronx, because most of the 80% of the kids I knew at school were from New York City,
and nothing's changed about that here. It's still really for some reason in Florida there's a lower standard of. Like, a lot of people come down here and it's horrible. Like, especially in business, you call someone to, I don't know, pick something, fix your roof, fix your pool. Maybe they show up, maybe they don't. And it's like, and then you call them. It's okay. It's much better on this coast. I'm in Tampa, which is not far from Clearwater, as you know.
Yeah.
The East Coast was far worse, but when you call them up, you're like, hey man, you never showed up. Oh yeah, my guy didn't make it in that day. Well, hey, motherfucker, maybe you pick up the phone and let me know, because I'm putting my fucking day on hold to pay you.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe it's a quirk of mine that you should call, but so you have like a really low service function here for the most part.
I don't know if that's just in Florida that happens, but
really? So that's the way it is all over.
Yeah, it's not. It's tough to get people to do anything for you.
Wow. Wow. But yeah, Florida has that attraction of drugs and fast cars, fast women.
It's just a cultural thing for kids at the time, like if you can get a kind of a glimpse of it, like even if you watch a dumb movie like Bad News Bears or something, I mean, that's not really that far removed from reality, with, kids and smoking weed and drinking beer and stuff, that we both know that shit happened. So,
but nowadays, man, if that's all they're doing, I'm like grateful.
Yeah, no kidding.
To be honest with you, my kids are 28, 26 and 18. We're all through that shit. But let me tell you, we had some periods there where, it was tough. I remember, I could say this now because he's older, but my first day, I think it was the first day of high school or middle school, my older boy comes home and I look at him and I'm like, man, you're all fucked up. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, you've been smoking weed. And he goes, what are you talking about? I said, man, I was born at night, but not last night. I said, sit your ass down. Right. And it's like, when that happens, and this is about you, I don't want to talk much about me, but it was, your head comes to a grinding stop. Cause like, okay, how do I process this now? Like, where's my bag of resources to handle this? And it's not there. At least for me, it's not. And I was like, holy shit. So it just opens up a whole, it's hard to process and handle. I didn't know what, you don't know what to do,
Well, I mean, I've never had to deal with that, I mean, the closest thing I've ever had to do to anything like that is like disciplining a cat. So.
I've had cats. They're a lot easier. I'll take 10 cats for every kid. Still be a lot less work, even if there's 5 or 6 cat boxes, it doesn't matter, man.
The closest I've come to that is like my very, very first guitar student I ever had was a 5-year-old boy. And he was actually pretty delightful, really.
Yeah, they're cute at that age.
But I was a babysitter, more or less,
Yeah.
For all I know, like he ended up playing guitar, for Dawkins or something.
Guns N' Roses. I interviewed Dawkins player John Levin. It could be.
Maybe it was him. I don't know.
Man, I saw a video with you, and you and I have spoken about this last time we talked about a physical ailment you have. And can you talk about this and how it's impacted you as a player? And I know there's probably other people that might be suffering from this, and any information that you want to share, please feel free.
Well, it was a huge impact, and it damn near cashed it in for me as a musician. The condition is called Focal Dystonia, which I somehow contracted in. I don't want to say I got it. It's not really in your limbs; it's in your brain. But it impacted my right hand, and I would suggest that anybody who wants to know more about it probably should just Google it. Look on Wikipedia or something for a better explanation than I can give. But it's something that hasn't really been known about for that long. I mean, it's been around a while, but it wasn't even really given a name until maybe 20 some years ago. And in fact, my neurologist didn't know. She knew less about it than I did. I saw 3 different neurologists, and none of them were really familiar with it. And it is a neurological disorder. It hasn't been studied that much because, dystonia like itself is a well-known thing, but focal dystonia, which affects just certain small motor functions of certain limbs. It's so abstract, it's difficult to explain. But what happens is that you basically just lose control of your fine motor functions. And at first, you don't really have any idea what's going on. But somehow, for people that are susceptible to this, you've somehow managed to train your brain to produce an incorrect response to an impulse. Okay, it's like I said, it's a very abstract thing. But when you try to do something, your hand just independently does something else. It might do the opposite movement or completely exaggerate the movement that you're trying to make. Like just simple, like if you try to say on the finger that's affected by it, you may try to curl it. And when you try to curl it, it automatically straightens it out, or it curls it so hard that it just pulls it right into your palm, and you lose control over the function of it. So the way this impacted me was that at the time I was a full-blown career as a pedal steel guitar player. And pedal steel guitar requires that you wear a thumb and at least 2 metal finger picks on your index and your middle fingers. Sometimes more. I know people that use 4 picks, but the standard approach is to use a thumb pick and 2 metal finger picks. So what was happening to me is that all of a sudden, my middle finger just wasn't hitting the strings anymore. I was missing it. So I didn't know what was going on. So I just started practicing harder with more attention and focus, not realizing that I was making my condition much worse by taking this approach. My reaction should have been to take the opposite approach to practicing, which was complete and total relaxation and not forcing myself to do anything. So because I didn't know anything about this condition, I misinterpreted all the signals that I was being given, and I ruined my right hand. I just destroyed it. It didn't at first affect my guitar playing, and then all of a sudden it did. I got where I simply could not hold a guitar pick anymore. I just couldn't do it. It wasn't, if I would just sit there and hold it like a normal pick, it was fine. But as soon as the sensory input of hitting a string entered my nerve impulse, my brain would fire an incorrect response, and my hand would open up, and the pick would just fall out of my hand. So this is something that's not unique to guitar players or even string players. There's a lot of different versions of this. There's a version that can, obviously there's one that can affect your left hand. I've seen some players that had it in their left hand and they could not bring, like, say, their third finger would not come down on the fingerboard anymore, no matter what they did. So there's a version that affects your embouchure, your lip, jaw, if you're a horn player. There's a version that affects your vocal cords if you're a singer. It has a little bit different name. They call it spasmodic dysphonia, but it's basically the same thing. It's a neurological problem. It's not really a disease. It's more of a condition because and it actually affects, they say statistically, 1 out of every 100 musicians, which is really a lot when you think about it. This is like a version of cerebral palsy almost.
Well,
sometimes it feels like a miniature version of cerebral palsy, kind of. It's in cerebral palsy and full body dystonia have similar effects to them, in that you don't have control of your motor functions. These are it's a learned response, though. It's something that's learned and drilled into your head without you realizing it. It's subconscious, and of course, because of the nature of it, it affects mostly like serious classical musicians, especially in their developmental stages, when they're trying to hammer in like new techniques and things like that. They could be afflicted by it, and it's the bad news is that it's incurable as it is, but that doesn't mean that you can't get around it somehow. Because I play electric guitar, I have a little bit more flexibility. The pedal steel guitar is history for me. I don't think
you don't play pedal at all anymore.
I can't play it. I can still operate everything except for the right hand, but what I did was I took up the non-pedal steel. And the reason it's different is because it has a little bit more flexibility as far as tuning. So what I was able to do was use some of the existing tunings on the non-pedal guitar, modify them a little bit so that I could play a version of it using just my thumb. My inspiration for this was a guy that played in Bob Wills's band named Bobby Kofer, who's actually still alive. I got to be friends with him, and he is the only steel guitar player, maybe him and another guy named Alvino Ray, possibly, that played just with their thumb with a kind of a strumming technique. I expanded that technique to almost sort of a flat picking type thing, which I do with just a thumb pick, since I can hold a guitar pick now when I play guitar, but I can't do very much with it. But I'm fairly flexible with a thumb pick. So that kind of became my new technique. So that's what I've been working on for the last 2 years, is just trying to adapt a thumb pick to my guitar playing. And
that's
by proxy, my steel guitar playing too.
Big change.
It was a big change because my right hand technique on guitar was kind of a point of pride for me. I worked on it, just laboriously for years. That, boy, it happened so fast. Like within a week, it was gone, like completely. So I had to wonder, am I ever going to play again? And this, for a guy that spent, at that point I had spent, 30 some years honing my craft, and then just to have it just completely undone in a manner. It happens so fast once it comes on you. In a matter of days, it was gone.
What did you do? So I would imagine you were like depressed as shit once this happened. And at a time you had a question, well, maybe this is the end. I shouldn't play, or I'm not meant to play, or I just can't play guitar. How did you kind of like hang in there, and like, what did you tell yourself, or what,
Well, yeah, you're right. I was way, way, way down about it. And I mean, I was still playing gigs. I could still play gigs, but I was playing at such a fraction of the level that I was at before. It was really hard, and there were so many things that I couldn't do. And I worked around it enough to a point where people would say, "Well, I don't notice any problem." I'd be like, "Well, you're only listening to what I'm playing. You're not listening to all the things that I'm not playing."
Yeah, I guess.
There's a considerable amount of stuff that I was editing out of my guitar playing, and it was very, very hard. And plus, it agonized me to see a video of myself with my hand all contorted. You can see it in the Focal Dystonia video, and my right hand looks terrible. I think I'd been playing with a thumb pick for about a week at that point. And when he asked me to do that video, I told him that I was in no way ready to do any kind of guitar instructional video. So he had the idea for me to do the video, the Focal Dystonia video, which I did. So so that was why I agreed to do it. But it's hard for me to watch, just because, if there's earlier videos of me playing guitar on YouTube, and you can see that I have the classic old school 1930s jazz right hand, it's perfect posture and everything, and good solid striking of strings. And then I look at the more recent ones, and it's just a damn mess. It's just hard for me to look at. Now, I'm working on correcting that right now, and it's gotten way better, but it takes an incredible amount of discipline to do it. It's like learning to play all over again, except this time I still have the knowledge, you know what I mean? And my left hand can still do all the things. So, but anyways, I don't want to digress from that, but I started playing more bass gigs, because I found that for some reason it does affect my bass playing, but not as much. And since most of the time on the gig I'm playing, quarter notes, and nothing super demanding, I was able to cover just about any kind of gig on bass without too much difficulty.
That's great.
Yeah. So I started working more as a bass player, and I got kind of whatever my feeble concept on the non-pedal steel guitar, I kind of got that together and started working with that too. So
I give you a lot of credit though, because, it seems like, in a bad deck of cards, you managed to emotionally pull out a couple of the best ones available, and that was a choice to say, okay, well, I can't do this as good, but I can do this as good. And that's not easy. You can play bass, but you can't play the guitar maybe as much.
Yeah.
That's just not easy. I give you credit.
Well, it was a matter of survival, just because, I have to keep working, right? I'm not going to stop playing. I had already made the decision that if I have to take up kazoo, I'm going to continue to play. I started messing around with the saxophone, just any kind of different instrument, I even borrowed my couple of my wife's practice pad and some of her drumsticks, and I was like working on drum rudiments and stuff, so anything, guys, like no matter what I do here, I'm not going to stop playing. If I can't play for a living anymore, that's one thing, but I'm still going to do something.
Yeah. Good for you, man. Well, I'm glad you figured out a way to sort of, do what you need to do to manage this and to move forward and still play.
It took a while, and on the guitar, like over the last few months, like for the first time since this started, I finally feel myself making progress.
That's great.
I can play some stuff that I haven't been able to play in a long, long, long time. So as long as I'm moving forward, that's all that matters to me.
Absolutely.
Just the years of just constantly rapidly backsliding, you know, and going backwards every day, man. I'd wake up and I could do less and less on the guitar. That was the first thing I would do every morning, is wake up and put a guitar in my hands and say, okay, what did I lose while I was sleeping last night?
God, that's a horrible way to live, man.
It was horrible, man. Yeah. It really was. It was like watching your own body decompose or something. Oh, my arm fell off, you know. Oh, no, there goes my foot.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's not cool. No. But I would know, with your work ethic, man, I'm not surprised that you figured out a way to do it. And I would also imagine your standards of tolerance are probably much lower for yourself than if it was someone else.
Well, yeah, you can see I even obsess over even how it looks when I'm playing, you know, even that bothers me, you know, even if what I was playing was okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, God, you just look so uncomfortable though, you know, and it is, it's really uncomfortable to play, you know.
But you do know nobody's looking at that but you, right? I mean, you're intellectually, you're aware of that, right? Yeah. Like no one's looking
yeah, absolutely. I realize that, but, you know, it just sucks because, you know, as a guitar player, you know, you're always like reaching for that point where you kind of enter this zone of playing where everything becomes kind of effortless, you know. Yeah. And I used to live for those moments, you know, when I was on a gig and I was just, you know, anything that popped into my head was right there. And, you know, it's almost an out of body experience when you're playing at that level. And I don't even know how many years have gone by since I've experienced that, you know, and boy, it's something you really learn to miss, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm hoping that's the biggest thing for when it happens, when I'm on a gig and I reach that point again, that's when I'll know I'm back in the game, you know. And when I reach that point, I'm probably going to be practicing 8 hours a day because I'm going to, you know, I will be coming for it with a vengeance, you know.
Well, man, my little exposure to you tells me that there's no doubt in my mind you're going to get that point. It's just a question of when. It's probably not going to be on your time frame, right? But it's probably going to happen.
You know, before I'm, you know, like 70 years old, okay, well, now I've got my chops back, but now I have arthritis.
Well, we got a minute till we're 70. I'm the same age as you, so I think you'll be all right, man.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. It's focal dystonia?
Dystonia. Focal dystonia.
Dystonia?
Yeah. Okay. And, you know, I've made contact with a lot of people that have had this terrible thing. And, you know, it's
you guys should set up like a private Facebook page or a private Facebook group or something, because if one guy finds
there actually is one. It's called Musicians with Focal Dystonia.
Oh, that's great.
It's a good place to look at too, if people share their own experiences and stories and stuff. You know, it was, I didn't want to go on Facebook and make a big deal out of it just because, you know, compared to what some other people were dealing with, you know, so many of my friends and were down with, you know, horrible things like cancer and stuff, you know, it just seems so petty to be like, oh, well, I can't play guitar as fast as I could before. You know what I mean? It's kind of whining about it. Although it really is, you know, it's devastating from a career standpoint. And it was difficult to express to people like why I couldn't do things that I could do before, you know. It's tough when you got people expect a certain thing of you and you have to tell them, say, well, I can't do that anymore. Why? You know, well, your hands look fine to me, you know. It's like, you know, yeah, some people, they just don't get it, you know. And that's probably the most frustrating thing about it for a lot of musicians, is just trying to, and you got to try to explain to yourself too. You know, this question is, why can't I do this anymore? I can think about it. I can look at it. I know what it's supposed to do. And then you go to do it and you can't, you know. It's incredibly frustrating.
Tough one, man. But I wouldn't say, just as an outsider, I don't think it's petty. I think what's petty is when people get on Facebook and bitch about like everything under the fucking sun That,
Well,
I mean, that is just obscene. I mean, that is just like, I feel like I need to send everybody a bill because the time in my life they just wasted, the cumulative. Seriously, man, it's like, fuck, you just made me waste 8 seconds of my life on nothing, or, it's just a rap.
That's what I say. I say, go see a shrink,
Yeah, man, that's exactly right. They got therapists that help you all that shit. You don't have to put it on face. That is so funny. My daughter posted something today, and I almost posted it up there. I says, "Is Facebook your therapist?" That's exact. Of course, I didn't, because you can't do that to an 18-year-old girl, because then they turn into Satan. But but yeah, I feel you. Hey, let's talk about gear for a few minutes. And how many? If I ask how many guitars you have,
I think. I tried to count it last week. I think probably about like 14 or 15, maybe.
Wow, that's
counting my dates is
super reasonable.
Yeah. I mean, I've never really had many more than that, But
that's extremely reasonable. What's your go-to? What's that?
It's still too many.
No, not at all. For a professional player like you that's involved in so much stuff, that's incredibly reasonable. So you can go, I'm going on record here of interviewing like 350 players. So if your wife ever says,
wow.
Dave, you don't need another guitar, you say, hold on a minute. 129.50 in this interview. Craig Garber.
Well, when I was in college, there was a guy there younger than me who was he was a young, like, prodigy violin virtuoso, and he went on to become like a world famous violinist. He's probably the most famous violinist. His name's Joshua Bell, and he's easy to find if you search for him. But he was in Indiana when I was there, and I think he's on his second Stradivarius now, and we're talking about a $4 million fiddle that he plays. Wow. So I don't feel too bad about spending $6,000 on a guitar.
Hell no.
Once in my life.
Hell no. So
when you think about it, like I know mechanics that have like $150,000 worth of tools. So.
It's your tool, man. I totally get it.
Yep.
What's your go-to guitar right now? Not for sessions. I mean, the one you like playing the most.
I'm a Les Paul guy. I have a lot of guitars that I really like, but I have a custom shop 58, R8 Les Paul, and that's my number one guitar that I pick up every time. Did
you buy that outright, or did you get it used, or how'd you get it?
Well, I have a friend that helps me out with guitar stuff. Sometimes he's actually built me a couple of really cool guitars. The company's called Burley Guitars out in Dripping Springs, Texas. And he's a super great guy. His name's Kim. He's built me he likes to build like kind of relic style Fender type guitars, but he also does some kind of oddball things. Like he'll do he has one he calls a Burley Bird that's kind of like a Firebird type guitar with a telly set up in it, and he's just a super cool, creative guy, and he loves making guitars, and he loves when we play them. He's built me a telly and a Strat and a couple of ridiculously great bass guitars that I love. And anyways, he says, "Bring your Les Paul out. I got one I want to show you, just like a show and tell thing." I had this really cool custom shop 59 Les Paul that I loved, and it was my number one guitar. And so I went out to his shop and I showed him my guitar, and he goes, "Here, what do you think about this one?" And he puts it in my lap, and it's just one of those things, man. I didn't even play a note on it. I just put my hand on the guitar, and I was like, "This is my guitar."
Love at first sight.
It was, I can't even explain the feeling I got. I put my hand around that neck and just put it in my lap, and I was like, I got to have this thing. So, I was 14 years old again, like instantly.
That's nice, man.
And so I worked out a trade with him, and he was gracious enough to swap me guitars, and now that is now my number one guitar. My friends make fun of me all the time. So, "Oh yeah, well, you say that now until next week when you find another one you like better." It's like, it's true that I have definitely gone through some guitars in my day. I've probably had 200 of them.
Oh wow!
Yeah. And, it's all the different types of things that I play. Sometimes like I said, when I get involved in a certain type of music or a certain type of playing, I'll gravitate towards that equipment for that type of gig. So, the thing I was doing before, this guitar doesn't mean that much to me anymore. I'm on to another thing.
Sure.
So, but now that I'm older, I've been settled on like playing like a Sunburst type Les Paul for a while. And, I've had four of them, or I've had three Sunburst ones. So, not really that many, but I would have never have traded my other one had I not just happened to stumble on this one, and that would have never happened if I'd found it in a store, because nobody would have just traded me straight across like that.
Are you a big guy? Because those have big necks, I think, don't they?
It's not that big.
It's not?
I have like medium, large, slightly larger than medium hands. I don't have like big hands, but big enough to where I can play any guitar neck and it's not going to bother me.
That's cool.
I'm only 5'9", so.
Right. Yeah, I'm same height, 5'9", and I have like average hands, so I struggle with an older, the 50s kind of neck. I love the slimmer fit 60s necks.
Yeah.
Was that black guitar you showed me, the Les Paul? Is that the one you're talking about?
No.
That's another.
No, that's a 76 custom, Les Paul custom. I've always had a thing for black Les Paul customs. I've had probably 6 or 7 of them. But that one, a friend of mine found it at a shop, and it was exceptional. And I told him, if you ever wanted to sell it, make sure, give me a crack at it. So one day he said, okay, I'm letting this thing go. I'm like, I have no money, but I'm going to figure it out. I got it. And he was cool enough to let me make payments to him.
Oh, that's cool. That must be heavy if it's a 76, no?
Well, it's not light, but I've had lots of 70s Les Paul customs, and this one is nowhere near as heavy by any stretch.
That's cool.
And that was one of the things I loved about it is that it's, wow, this is a lighter one than usual,
Yeah.
But that's not to say that it's light by any stretch. It's still a Les Paul, but it's very, very playable, and it sounds terrific.
So your 58 R8, that's the Burst, right?
That's the Burst. Yeah. It's actually a what they call a collector's choice Ronnie Montrose model. Believe it or
cool.
not. Yeah. And
did you know Ronnie?
I never met him. No, but I'm a huge Montrose fan. Yeah.
So that's your number one. What would be number 2 and number 3? What would round out your top 3?
Well, number 2 has got to be my Collings I-35 that was built for me just for the Crossroads show.
That's pretty
cool. That's what I played on the Crossroads gig. The Collings makes a guitar to me that is just like I can't imagine that there's anything out there that's better than what they make, just as far as their supreme quality of the instruments. I mean, it's absolutely flawless in every respect, the playability, the fit and finish of it. And they just keep getting better too. I'm kind of jealous because they put out a couple of guitars that I like better than mine. And I even tried to hint at, hey, let's, trade mine in and take this one.
Hook a brother up.
Yeah. But you know what though? I can't complain, man. I'm extremely happy with this guitar. It's a wonderful guitar, and I wouldn't trade it for anything except to them for something else that they gave me. You know what I mean? So.
Every player that I've talked to that has a Collings, I interviewed someone earlier today, Ariel Posen, saying he everybody loves their Collings, man.
I mean, they're unbeatable. When the guitar that they built for me didn't exist really in its form. They had their I-35 is it's a slightly smaller 335.
Yeah, like a 339 kind of, right?
Kind of, yeah. A little larger than that. It's like halfway between. But I think it's a 16-inch body, I believe. But it just was more comfortable for me than a 335 or a 330, But But I liked the bound fingerboard and headstock and all that business, and they didn't have that at that time. And I told him, I said, I really love that bound fingerboard. And he goes, well, we'll just make one like that. So it turned out that Bill Frisell and I asked for the exact identical guitar. So they just made two of them and gave one to him and one to me.
That's awesome, man.
If I ever get to meet Bill Frisell, at least I'll have an icebreaker right there.
Yeah, there you go, man. Yeah. That's very cool.
Yeah.
And what would be number 3? So you got the Les Paul 58 R8 and the Collings I-35. What's number 3?
If I had to pick one, I would probably. I have a custom Telecaster, and the main reason it's just a regular. It's a regular old like a blackguard, blonde blackguard Telecaster, like a early 50s style, and I actually do really love the guitar, but it's the main thing that makes it special to me is that it was just a gift from Jimmie. So
oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, Jimmie's been known to give people that he likes a guitar. I think he gave one to Sue recently.
She did. She showed it on. Yeah. He's on social.
He wants everybody to have a cool guitar, And if anybody is going to be the arbiter of what qualifies as a cool guitar, I would take Jimmie's word for it every time. But but he gave me this kick-ass Telecaster, and I've actually been playing it a lot lately.
That's nice.
And it has a pretty beefy neck on it too, but it's pretty comfortable.
That's nice.
Well worn.
Fan. Thanks. Sorry about that. My wife just came in. She brought me some coffee, and I just asked her to turn on the fan while she was here. Iced tea. Thank you.
Oh, you haven't hit with the cold front yet, huh?
Dude, we had it was a day. It was 75, and it was awesome. And then this morning, I went out. It was oppressive. It's gross again.
Well. It went from 90 to 42 here in one day. So
yeah, Florida, we don't get your cold. We don't have that because I've been to Texas. I've been to El Paso and a couple other places where you wake up in the morning, it's 40, and in the evening or afternoon it's 90. We don't get that here. We don't get extremes. We may get zapped for yeah, that's right. You live there. You know what it's like.
Yeah,
here, man.
I remember it well.
Yeah. Name a couple of players, Dave, that you've really enjoyed jamming with, and maybe another one or two that you'd like to jam with.
Well, I don't find myself jamming with a lot of players around town. Usually I just have close friends of mine will come over and we'll just sit and just trade licks on guitars and stuff. And they're mostly just local friends of mine where we have similar interests that we're into and stuff, So there's not really anybody really specific, except for just my friends, and we just geek out on guitars, A couple of guys that I'm in bands with and stuff. We have a lot of fun just sitting around noodling and stuff.
Sure.
But as far as people that I would like to jam with, there's one notable person that I jammed with one time, and this is I'll try to make this story short, but about 1993, I went to a jazz guitar weekend seminar in Louisville, Kentucky, the three jazz artists that were going to be there were Jimmy Rainey, one of my top guys, and Jim Hall, another one of the top guys, and my maybe my favorite jazz guitar player, Howard Robertson.
Oh, cool.
And, unfortunately, Howard got sick that week, and he ended up passing away around that time, so he wasn't at the clinic. But I was really excited about meeting Jim Hall. He was a guy that I was really into at the time, and so they do the morning master class, and then some of the guys from the school took Jim out to lunch at some home cooking place. And I told my friend that was with me, I said, hey, let's go follow them. Go eat lunch with Jim Hall. So we got in the car, and I followed the guys to the restaurant, and I found myself sitting next to Jim Hall at the restaurant. So I just got to hang out and eat lunch with him. And I just mentioned to him, I said, listen, Mr. Hall, I would really love it if there was some way possible that I could sit down and play a couple of tunes with you before this thing's over with. And this is something I would never do. You know, I would never approach any player, a famous player, and ask him something stupid like that. You know,
well, you were in a seminar. It's totally within context.
But I wanted to do it independent of the seminar. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And he was like, absolutely, you know, no problem at all. You know, so great, man, that'd be awesome. So we go back, and then immediately after lunch, it's time for Jim Hall's masterclass, which of course I attend. And he goes, all right, let's get started. Where is Dave? Where's Dave, the guy I ate lunch with today? And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, come on up, Dave, and bring your guitar and let's play some tunes. And I was like, oh my God. Oh,
wow. That is so cool.
Well, it was cool, but at the same time,
not what you envisioned.
What I meant. I didn't want to jam with Jim Hall in front of 60 guitar geeks, you know?
Yeah.
So, and, you know, I felt like an idiot anyway, because every single guy there's got these cool old, like, you know, Gibson and Epiphone, you know, beautiful archtop guitars. I brought a Telecaster, you know, so I'm already out of place. I already look like a hillbilly compared to these guys, you know, but it was really, really cool.
That's awesome.
Jim, of course, he was a master musician, and it didn't matter what kind of like bullshit you played. He made it sound like $1 million just because of the way he comped chords behind you, you know. He'd play a wrong note. He would play an appropriate chord that had your stupid wrong note in it. It didn't work, you know what I mean? He just had a knack for it.
That's so cool.
And it ended up being really cool. You know, I was nervous as hell, couldn't play for shit, but he was very gracious, you know.
That's a nice story, man. I like it.
Yeah, I wasn't going to be recommended to play in Sonny Rollins' band or anything at that time, so I just took what I could get from it, you know.
It's a great experience, man.
Yeah. But as far as guys that I would like to jam with, I don't know if I'd like to jam with them, but this kind of, you haven't asked me about like my guitar heroes yet, but maybe we just wait for that.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's talk about your guitar heroes. Who's your favorite guitar player? I know what you're going to say based on what we talked about earlier. I think I do.
Well, I mean, probably, you know, to me, like the greatest guitar player that ever lived was Django Reinhardt. Right. You know, he's the greatest. However, I have a soft spot for, and probably my all-time guitar hero in any other realm other than Django, would be Jimmy Page, which might surprise a lot of people, but Jimmy Page was my first major guitar hero that I like, you know, like the worship type, you know what I mean? I've had several others that I would worship at different times over the years, you know. I went through different phases, but the guy that came back to me when I sort of, after 40 years and coming full circle, it was back to Jimmy Page for me, you know. And I get angry at people if they slag him in any way, shape, or form, you know, like talk about that he's sloppy.
I hate hearing that. I mean, it's like,
it just,
I wish I was like a 10th that sloppy, or maybe 100th that sloppy.
Yeah. Well, whether or not he was sloppy or whatever is completely beside the point. You could say this same thing about, you know, Chuck Berry or Keith Richards or whatever, you know. And you could even say that about Barney Kessel. You know, sometimes he would wash through some things sometimes, and it might come off as being a little bit like not exactly on the mark, but it makes absolutely no difference to me whatsoever, like whether what they played was perfectly executed or whatever. But people start going off on that thing on Jimmy Page, and I'll get aggressive about it, defending him.
Well, it's just amazing me that people have the time on their agenda to spend doing that. Like, what have you done?
Yeah, right.
Exactly. I mean, Jimmy Page, I know it's how you make people feel. That's what music's about, and the guys that are grading people's playing, they're missing the whole point of music.
Well, it always amuses me that, that anyone would, just be critical of somebody whose stature in the history of music is just cast in solid iron. You know what I mean? It's totally immovable.
Yeah.
Totally. What I mean? It's pointless. All you do by criticizing them is just exposing your ignorance, And
the guy was a top session player in England before he was, a rock player. Yeah, as a teenager. And so, you know what? He's playing what he wants to play because, believe me, I guarantee he wasn't, quote, sloppy being the top session player in the whole freaking country.
No, he was a guy that had a very clear vision of what he wanted to do, and he executed it. And whatever pitfalls he had on his way in or out of the top of the food chain in music, to me, is irrelevant at this point. He's his spot in the history of rock music is full on cement. You cannot move it.
I agree with you, man. I have some really good Zeppelin bootlegs where he's playing songs for 12, 14 minutes beyond just Dazed and Confused, which is probably like a half hour. But and man, you just listen to what he's doing, and it's just to solo that long all night without repeating stuff.
Well, originally, my attraction to Jimmy Page was just, he was my rock hero, and I wanted to play like him. I wanted to be him. I wanted to have a 59 Les Paul like his, and when I was in my first rock band where I had enough equipment to do so, I tried to stack my amps like he did, and you know what I mean? I was played along with the records and stuff, even though I had no idea what I was doing. But now my attraction to him is more just his stature in the history of rock music and in my own history as a guitar player. I acknowledge him as my first and my most cherished guitar hero in the history of my playing. So, he's the one guy on the planet where if he walked into a room while I was playing, I would lose it. I can play in front of anybody at this point. I'm so jaded, but if Jimmy Page walked in, I think I would just be frozen.
That's
I really
awesome,
would. And it's not that I'm intimidated by his prowess or his history as a musician. It's just it would just freak me out so bad. And this is a guy I've played in front of John Paul Jones and Robert Plant before, but never Jimmy Page.
No, I totally get it, because certain people, it's not like being starstruck. It's just their impact on you. It's like in your DNA. It's so deep. I totally get that, because I've had that a couple of interviews I did. I don't get starstruck at all. I know everybody's the same. We're all, somewhat little dysfunctional, and we're just getting through the day, and we all have too much shit on our to-do list, and the kids don't listen to you when they suppose, we're not all that different, it's
right.
But certain guys, like you absorb so much of them. It's like, how can that be possible? Now we're talking, or you're in the room with me, or we're playing guitar together in your case. I totally get that, man. I really do. Yeah. That's great, man. I'm glad. Jimmy, if you are listening, you need to give Dave, seriously, man, make Dave's fantasy come true, man. Just hook him up and just get on stage together. Invite him up on stage. That would be awesome.
Man. Good Lord.
That would be awesome.
If I could just meet him and talk to him, I don't know what I would talk to him about, but I definitely would not go into any kind of hero worshiping trip and just make him uncomfortable, But,
you talk about guitars.
Yeah. Talk our mutual heroes, because we do have some,
Do you know, I'm sure you know Greg Martin. from the Headhunters.
I never met him, but I know who he is for sure.
He's got a 58 original Les Paul that he plays.
Well, it's funny because I came this close to buying the custom shop collector's choice Greg Martin model, which I thought was really terrific.
Wow.
I already had a great Les Paul, and then and I didn't pull the trigger on it, but that was a really good one.
Yeah, it's a. You know what? I don't get that. Now most guys play loads of different guitars. That's all Greg plays. He plays Gibson Les Pauls, and they stopped making that guitar. I mean, why? That's a guy. His tone is like to die for. Just him into a Marshall. That's it. And
you're talking about the quit making like the Sunburst Les Pauls?
Yeah, the Gregs. They don't have very many of those.
Oh, you mean his model?
His signature model? Yeah. And like, I don't know why Gibson doesn't. I mean, it's off topic totally, but why don't they support a guy like that? Goes weird.
Yeah. Well, they couldn't support anybody right now. So.
Yeah. Very good point. Is there a guitar you consider to be like the holy grail of guitars? Something that you picked it up once and like, man, that was it. It was, most beautiful woman in the world.
You mean something that I've actually played in my life?
Yeah.
I have played a couple of bursts and after playing them, I totally get it. I mean, that would be the grail for me, although I don't know what the hell I would do with a $250,000 guitar. Yeah. I had a guitar once that I paid $6,500 for, and it constituted my entire life savings at that point, and I was so terrified to take it anywhere. I couldn't wait to unload it, so I sold it immediately almost, Yeah. And I couldn't imagine like doing that same thing with a guitar that costs, $300,000,
But apparently,
but that would be the holy grail. I wish it was like 1970, and then I could have like a $400, Les Paul, and then I wouldn't care that much.
I hear you, man.
But that is definitely the grail for me, I would say. But it's 59. It's grail to me implies that it's just something that's unobtainable, and that most certainly is. So,
best guitar and best amp you've owned.
Well, the guitar that I was just talking about was a 1953 Les Paul, but it had a wrapped tailpiece, and that was, I would have to say, that is just all in all, tone, value, playability, the way it looked, everything about it. That was the best guitar I've ever owned. I mean, it was the most expensive guitar I've ever owned, but it was the best. And
that was a $6,500 guitar you bought that you had to get rid of.
That was a $6,500 guitar that is now worth closer to $40,000. Yeah. So, but at the time, $6,500 was a very fair price for it. So, but I sold it to a friend of mine who I knew had some dough and collects guitars, and he bought it from me, and he was bummed out because it didn't have the original truss rod cover on it. I remember that. So I think he went and paid like $500 for an original truss rod cover. But anyways, for him, he's a collector. That makes the guitar worth more to him, So, amp wise, I've had a couple of dandies, but I think probably it would be a toss up between a 1957 Fender Twin, a Tweed high powered Twin that I had, and two different plexi front Marshalls that I owned in the mid 80s that were a dime a dozen back in those days, but now they're worth a fortune.
Yeah, they're like $3,000, $3,000 to $5,000 now, I think.
Yeah, if you're lucky. I've seen them for much more than that.
Oh wow.
Yeah, even 10.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
One amp that I have that's really cool, that I inherited from my grandfather. He had a little brown face Princeton. This one right here. If you can see it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's pretty big for back in the day.
What's that?
That looks pretty big for back in the day.
No, it's a small amp. It's just a Fender Princeton, but that was his main amp, and I'm pretty sure he bought it new, but I looked at the tube chart, and it was built in June of 1963.
Wow.
I was born June 18th, 1963. So
that's a special
I fantasize about the idea that amp was finished and pushed out of the factory on that exact day. How cool would that be?
I think it was.
And I have probably a 1 in 30 chance of that being true, so.
That's awesome. Very cool, man.
But I inherited that he passed away in 1982. So I've had that little amp, for
46 years.
36 years.
36 years, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember, what's the first record you ever bought? Do you remember?
I'm not sure I remember exactly which one it was. The 45s is what I bought first, because that, if my mom gave me, you could buy them for 89 cents at the dime store. And I'm pretty sure that the first record I bought was Frankenstein by the Edgar Winter Group. I'm not positive, but that was definitely one of the very early ones that I bought. And I think I bought it just because of the title, because I was a monster movie fanatic. But it was around that time. I also got Alice Cooper's No More Mr. Nice Guy. So it was one of those two. I don't remember which one came first. Probably whichever one was released first. I also was really into Three Dog Night when I was a kid too. So it might have been one of those records too.
They had tons of hits, that band. They were great.
Oh, they were great, man.
Desert Island Discs. No particular order, just for this moment, knowing that it'll change tomorrow. What top three?
One record that I've always been sort of it's embedded so deeply in my history, and it was my favorite record when I was a kid. Was Led Zeppelin Song Remains the Same, the live, the live soundtrack. Now, obviously, I'm aware that is generally regarded as not any kind of a special performance in any way, even by fans or even of the band themselves. They all acknowledge it. There was nothing really that special about that night. But I grew up with that record, and I still know every single note on it inside and out. And I have a hard time living the rest of my life without it. So I have to have that. I still have my original album that I bought. There's almost nothing left of it. I wore the grooves off it. I bought the reissue CD of it. My favorite thing is still just to listen to that album.
It's great. What's your favorite song on that record?
Extra tracks, it bothers me because they weren't there before, and it sounds like a different record to me. So, you know what I mean? I like to listen to everything in the exact same order as I did when I was 14 when that record came out. So, it was around right about the time that I started playing guitar. I was a Zeppelin fan before I started playing. I think I went straight from, as a seventh grader, I went straight from Kiss to Led Zeppelin.
What's your favorite track on that on the soundtrack? Song Remains the Same.
Well, I've always loved the extended Dazed and Confused with all of its little parts and everything, but I love the song Remains the Same. I've always loved that track, but when I was a kid, my favorite track on the whole thing was No Quarter.
That's mine, man.
Yeah, that was my favorite thing on there. It sounded like parts of it sounded like jazz. It made me want to learn how to play jazz guitar, even because to me that's what it sounded like at the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, his solo in there is.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's wonderful. I still love it. I still get a charge listening to it.
It's a great record. All right, what else? To get two more.
Oh, no, another record. Let me see here. This is going to sound really pretentious, and I don't want to sound that way because I'm not. Obviously, I'm not. I'm not a snob when it comes to any kind of music, but I just happen to be a big fan of classical music, particularly like early to mid 20th century classical music, and geez, man, I'm going to come off sounding like some kind of a
No,
nerd.
a lot of guys like, you know what? You know how many guitar?
I know there's the history of the neoclassical metal guys that are into Bach and Paganini and stuff like that, and that's all great too. And that's not really what got me into it, but what I love is like the modern composers, you know, the late period guys that were really like, you know, guys like Stravinsky that were causing riots at their concerts and stuff, you know, just pushing the envelope, man. But I don't think I could live on an island without Mahler's 10th Symphony. And he didn't actually finish that symphony. He only completely finished the first movement of it. And honestly, while the whole thing is really great, and there's been people that have finished versions of the symphony after his death, the part that he finished, just the very first adagio movement, is all I would need on the island, because that in itself, I can't listen to it without like my knees buckling in certain parts and the hair standing up on the back of my neck. It's just one of those things. I just, you know,
dude, that's pretty powerful stuff. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah,
it doesn't sound pretentious.
I gotta have that.
That sounds great, man. Something makes you feel that good.
Yes, probably if I had to pick a third, it would be. It's been a long time since I listened to this stuff, and I can't remember all the tracks that are on it. But Django Reinhardt, in a session in January of 1946, I believe, cut 8 tracks. I think there's a version of Nuage on. There's like 11 different versions of Nuage that he recorded, but there's that one. There's Django's Castle. There's 6 other tracks, and I can't recall them off the top of my head right now, but because I haven't listened to them for years, like I said. However, I have the 78s. I collected the 78s of each one of those sides, and if I listen to them on my little old elementary school Caliphone record player that I have right here, they sound so damn amazing, man. If you stand with your back to this thing, when the guitar comes out, it sounds like Django was sitting in a chair right behind you playing. It's incredible. It's probably some of my favorite recordings of any guitar playing, period.
That's very cool, man.
I have lots of favorite guitar stuff. You know, I mean, I have a pretty broad palette when it comes to my taste in music. Obviously, you know, I listen to anything from you know, Buck Owens to Shostakovich to, you know, to Judas Priest. You know what I mean? And I listen to all this stuff regularly at different times. You know, I listen to Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, you know.
Well, you've got a lot deep musical education as well. So,
well,
I mean, yeah.
I've mostly educated myself musically. I did take advantage of some of the classes that were available to me at Indiana. You know, there was an incredible music school, and I either took the classes formally or I sat in on like jazz improv class or something like that. But I didn't get any kind of a music degree or any kind of a degree at all, actually.
Oh, really?
No, I did not. I studied audio tech for a couple of years. They had an associate's degree. I didn't finish that either. I did not. That was one area of my life that I kind of failed, was college. You know, I got married during that time, and it screwed everything up. You know?
Yeah, I hear you, man. This is a tough question, especially for you. What do you like most about yourself, Dave?
Probably that I have a tendency not to give up, you know. I think I proved that to myself with the adversity of this thing that I had happen with my hand. You know, it was demoralizing, but you know, I persevered through the whole thing, and I'm still out here doing it. You know, so probably I would say that would probably be the thing. You know, and it's not like I've never given up on anything. You know, there's things I have given up on, Like, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a baseball player. When I was 17, I tried out for the Toronto Blue Jays.
Did you really?
Just a cold call tryout. Yeah.
That's cool.
There was an expansion team at the time, and they were just
right.
barnstorming the country, and they came through my town and were looking for players, and I went for it, Why not?
That's really cool.
Yeah. But, eventually I realized that I was not going to be a professional baseball player. You know what I mean?
To try it out, though, that's really cool. I mean, how cool is that? How many people have tried out for a professional baseball team?
Worth a shot.
That's awesome, man.
Well, in that case, just about everybody in my hometown did, but yeah. But hey, why not?
Flip side of that, if you could change one thing about yourself, what would you want to do?
Well, there's a lot of things I could change, because it would have to be something I'd have to go back in history to change it. But the problem that I had when I was younger is that it took me too long to figure out what the hell I wanted to do. I mean, I've probably always had been going to be a musician. Well, that's quite a sentence. But I didn't realize that at first. I didn't really think it was possible at that time, because I didn't know that there was such a thing as like what I would call like a music as a vocation, as in like a workaday musician. I don't think I realized that kind of thing existed back then. I think if you were going to be a musician, you were in a rock band, or you were a professional jazz musician, which was just way beyond my imagination at the time, or you were you played in the symphony or whatever. I didn't know that there were guys that made a living like playing nightly in a club, or backing up an artist, or playing in a lounge, whatever. It was 1988 or something like that when I got my first gig of that type, where I realized, somebody hired me. Hey, we're playing this lounge at this resort, 6 nights a week, and we'll pay you $350. I'm like, what, are you shitting me? Really? Like a paycheck? So, that was at that point that I realized that, wow, you can do that.
Yeah.
So if I'd have known that before, I probably would have been way more proactive about advancing my own skill as a player, and if I could have looked ahead, all the resources were there. I just didn't really take advantage of them the way that I could. I didn't study my instrument formally with anybody. As a result, I developed some really bad playing habits and really awful technique that I later had to change, So those were probably the things I would change, and maybe there are a few other very important decisions that I made in my life, especially during the 80s, that did not serve me very well.
This is an interesting question. What's a perfect day for you?
Well, let me see here. I don't know. I'm like a routine oriented guy, but on the other side of the coin, though, I'm also restless. So it makes for some major conflicts for me psychologically, because I don't like to be broken out of my routine. But at the same time, I get in a rut and then I get bored, So, yeah.
I get you.
Probably it's just a day for me is like doing exactly what in the hell I feel like doing the entire day, even if it's nothing at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Would you do that though? Would you ever do nothing? Like you don't?
No, I would never do nothing. But if I felt like doing nothing, I could. I mean, if left to my own devices, I get up pretty early. I like to just, before I even put my pants on, I will have already walked around the house playing guitar for an hour or so. And then, go eat lunch or something and come home and, read or screw around on the internet or something, and then maybe play some more guitar, drag my amps out in the living room, and you know what I mean? Go take a ride on my bike,
Motorcycle or like a
motorcycle.
Okay, yeah, cool. Is it safe over there? Because I met a lot of people
No, it's not.
Yeah, I met a lot of people our age, and they said, I've never really wanted a bike, but it came up in conversation. They said, look, if you're in a small, quaint little country town, a bike is okay, man. You take a bike into the city. Because all of them knew people that got killed, and I was like, yeah, okay.
There isn't anywhere on earth that you can't get run over on a motorcycle. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're in a dinky town or if you're in New York City. I've seen guys blasting through Manhattan on bikes before. And, Austin is a big city with a lot of clueless drivers, and it doesn't matter. You can never, ever, ever be complacent and comfortable. The type of bike I ride, you're kind of always in the game anyway. It's not comfortable, and, but I still love to ride.
Does your wife ride?
Yeah, she does.
Oh, so you guys go together. That's kind of cool.
Sometimes we have very different types of bikes.
Okay.
It requires different types of riding. She has a newish Harley Softail, and you can cruise on that thing at 95 miles an hour. I ride a 71-year-old motorcycle, that I built myself. It's on a rigid frame, and you just can't ride it like that.
Sure.
It'll either it's going to come apart or you're going to die, one or the other.
Yeah, neither, which is a good
both.
option.
Yeah.
Happiest moment or time in your life?
Let's see here. Of course, any kind of thing like that, it always involves your significant other, right? It should.
Depends on the person. Everybody has different relationship dynamics. People, I've found people get together for.
Luckily, my wife is able to overcome the fact that I'm a complete stick in the mud. And she forces me to have a good time a lot of times in spite of myself. So she's drugged me to some places that I was, maybe ambivalent about, or, whatever, but it ended up being something that I would never have experienced without her, like going to Hawaii, which we did
that's
for
beautiful there, man.
15th anniversary. Yeah, it was incredible, and
I actually got married there.
In Maui?
We got married in Maui, as a matter of fact. Yeah, we did. And my wife's family's in the UK, and I don't really have any family, so we just said, let's go there and get married.
So you went to like Lahaina and then did on the beach and everything?
No, we went to. No, this is like pretty hysterical. My wife, there was no internet at the time. This is 1994, and there was she just booked it. It was this place called Whale Watch Cottage up somewhere. I don't even know where. I'd have to look it up. But this is what the real stupid thing is. I went in a suit and she went in a nice formal wedding dress. And we're there. We're like, why did we do this? Why don't we just wear like on the beach, white pants and yeah. But it was kind of funny. But we got married in Hawaii. It was good just the same. But yeah. But Hawaii is beautiful, isn't it, man?
Yeah, it was incredible, and of course I would have never left my own devices, I mean, and we've done lots of stuff like that, one weekend on her birthday, I told her we could go anywhere in the continental United States she wanted to go, and she wanted to go to New York City. Like she loves New York, as do I. And we just went there and just ran around for a weekend. We went to museums, stuff, and Broadway show and all that bit, all the kind of the thing. I've been to New York a zillion times, but always working, you know? So, but when she goes with me, then she drags me on all the tourist stuff that I would never see, you know? So, you know, I would have never went to the Empire State Building or gone to the Statue of Liberty or Ellis Island or all that cool shit that I totally would have missed out on if she hadn't taken me there. So, she's been responsible for a lot of pretty awesome, interesting stuff, you know?
That's great, man.
Because she likes to get out there and do shit, you know? I'm a curmudgeon when it comes to traveling. I hate it. You know, I really hate it. But,
I get it though. As a professional musician, man,
just done it so much.
Yeah, I totally get it, man. Do you have any hobbies or interests outside of music? I want to come back to that because it has to do something with your tattoos. You told me.
Well, that comes with the whole biking thing, you know.
Oh, okay.
I'm a many years bike guy, you know, and I don't like to put myself in the class with the kind of like douchey lawyer, you know, leather and do-rag thing. I'm more of an old school, like denim, you know, I ride in a club, have for a long time. And that's what some of my tattoos have to do with. You know, it's just that whole culture of the old school motorcycling where we build our own choppers based on, you know, old, like vintage Harley Davidsons and stuff. Everything I do, I like everything old, you know. All my guitars are old. The music I listen to is old. The bikes, the cars, everything, you know. My mom told me, said she was amazed that I married a younger woman. She thought for sure I would marry an old lady.
Well, good for you that you did, man.
Yeah.
Keeps you one foot in reality.
Yeah.
What's the favorite place you've traveled?
Well, definitely Hawaii would probably be pretty tops on my list. That was pretty damn awesome. A couple of my favorite cities around the world. I love London. I love Amsterdam, Barcelona, Paris. One place that I was not ready to be so blown away by was Berlin. I thought Berlin was amazing. I loved it too. And I love Stockholm and Oslo, Norway, you know, Copenhagen.
Wow, you know, you've been all over, man.
All the big European cities are great. Edinburgh, Scotland was amazing. Yeah, you know, I mean, over the course of 25 years of, you know, I've been to Europe many times. And although, you know, I may not have had the greatest time when I was there just because of the circumstances, I still was able to appreciate, you know, where I was, you know, the old cities, you know.
That's great, man.
Yeah. So, you know, it was cool. You know, it's always cool to see something that's, you know, a 1,000-year-old church. And
oh, it's amazing there, those churches. Yeah. The little tiny quaint. Yeah.
Yeah. The remnants of societies that are so long past, you know.
My wife is from over there, from a small town there, actually. And the church where she was christened in was, you know, built in like 200 AD or something ridiculous like that, you know.
Yeah.
It's really, from our vantage point, you know, coming here, it's 200 years old. It's
I mean, in Austin, if we have a building that's more than, you know, 100 years old, they tear it down and put a CVS pharmacy up in its place. You know, there's seems to be no regard for like the history of like buildings and stuff around here. If you got enough money to buy the property and tear down the building and put up your boutique and, you know, go for it, you know.
I just think that's the way of the cities all over, man, to be honest with you.
Sure
it seems.
Yeah.
Hey, two more questions, Dave. Best advice you've ever been given, if you can remember it, and who gave it to you?
I don't know, because I never really sought out anybody's advice, and I was never really given it when I was, you know, coming, when I was coming of age as far as like, professional or anything like that,
Mm-hmm.
I think the advice I just gave to myself, and hopefully just had an intuitive idea of what I should do. Whether I followed my own advice or not is a different story. But by the time anyone ever had tried to offer me advice, I was already firmly established in what I was doing, and I was not prone to accept advice, like unsolicited advice from somebody who was, hadn't done even an inkling of what I had done at that point. That happened like once or twice, but I probably was not too receptive to advice when I was younger, just because number one, my defiant attitude towards authority figures, and always thinking that I knew more than anybody else. And of course, that wasn't true at all. But I probably may have been able to get some valuable advice from people if I had looked for it, but I didn't really.
How are you now with that? Are you still defiant or still like anti-authority?
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
However, I'm probably more open to it to somebody who I respect, like some random Joe Schmo comes up and offers me advice. Hey, can I give you a piece of advice? No. I mean, you can try, but I won't listen to it.
Do you get stuff like that on the internet? Like people say, "Hey, have you ever done this? Have you ever considered doing this or that?" Like just totally random shit. Like, what the fuck? Don't you got a job or something to do, or like family?
Recently, we live in the age now where it's like you can't play a single note on stage without somebody with their phone in your face recording it, right? So, you're open for criticism every time you pick up your instrument on a gig, and sometimes you don't want to be, and so every once in a while somebody will post a video of you playing and you'd watch it and you're like, oh geez, man, did you have to put that up there? Yeah. And recently there was one where a guy wanted to offer me some advice about, that I play too many notes or whatever. You've
got to be kidding me. Is he a professional player? Not possible, because the professional.
I don't think so. I don't know, but that's so funny because that's one thing I've never really been accused of, is playing too many notes. And he called me Mozart. So I said, well, I'm just going to take that as a compliment.
Yeah. I find that
how do you call somebody Mozart and have it mean something derogatory?
I just find it amazing that people,
child genius,
have the time or inclination to even do, like, well, man, what are you getting? What are you getting out of that? Like, what's in that for you? I just don't.
It's just a way to make people with low self-esteem feel better about themselves. That's all it is.
Yeah. I mean, I just boggles my, I mean, something happened yesterday.
I'm not completely like innocent of ever like ripping on another musician. Of course I've done it. But
you can post it on Facebook and give them personal advice. I bet you haven't done that.
If I did, I would feel terrible about it. You know what I mean? I would never try to be anything but encouraging to anyone that plays music. Yeah. And like I told you, I love reading about like classical composers and stuff, and I was just amazed at how every single one of them, without fail, when they would introduce a new piece of music that would employ a new concept or anything that was out of the ordinary or trying to push any musical boundary, the critics would just rip them to shreds every single time.
Unreal.
I mean, we're talking to everybody from, Beethoven, especially in the 20th century when guys were really like stretching it out, like they were just disregarded as just garbage, but yet here we are 200 years later listening to this music and studying it in university settings. And what was the name of the critic that said that? Yeah. I don't know either, So
last question, man. biggest change in your personality over the last 10 years, and how much of this change is deliberate and intentional? How much is just a part of aging?
Well, they were probably, I think I've mellowed out quite a bit. Just, I have a tendency to more just let the chips fall where they may, I'm not, musically for the first time, I've kind of let all my influences over the years just kind of filter into what I play in any way that they just happen naturally. I've been in lots of different kinds of music, and I tend to stay focused on them over the years. So, if I play, if I'm playing a Buck Owens tune, I'm going to be very careful not to allow an Allman Brothers idea to come into my playing by accident, or something that I learned from Ritchie Blackmore. Is
that hard to do?
Well, I got pretty good at it just because I stayed focused, but nowadays I love when that happens, I love when all of a sudden, I'm playing a jazz standard or something, and also, wow, that's something I learned off a Black Sabbath album, or you know what I mean? Or, whoa, I bent a string by accident. Yeah, well, it's no accident, or if I'm playing a jazz standard and I just suddenly decide to play a T-Bone Walker lick or something, you know what I mean? I just let it happen. I don't care, that's part of my history as a player. So, and now I find that my friends catch it when I do it and they get a kick out of it, so you know what I mean?
God, sorry.
I'm not so much a purist anymore. So, yeah. What are you saying?
Black Sabbath you mentioned, and I know you're in a couple of Sabbath tribute bands. What's your favorite Sabbath song? Because I love that band.
Let me see. It would probably have to be, I don't know, Snowblind is one of my favorites for sure. And as far as I was doing this song in a band called National Acrobat that I love to play bass on. That one was really fun. I also played in another band, and we did it when I played guitar too. So that was a really fun one to play. But I'd have a hard time picking my favorite Sabbath tune,
Mm-hmm.
But
very
probably
cool.
that I lean towards. Yeah.
Hey man, I can't thank you enough for your time. I really appreciate you coming on the show, man. It was an honor and a privilege to talk with you, man. You're a really great player, and you're a deep guy. And
privilege was all mine. It was a lot of fun, and I guess all of us narcissistic musicians love talking about ourselves. So.
No, you're far from narcissistic, man. Let me tell people where they could find you. If you haven't listened to Dave's playing, please check him out online. It's Dave Biller, Biller. And okay, so and he's got a bunch of gigs always in the Austin area, and he's a phenomenal player, man. This guy's so diverse. Clapton asked him. I'm going to embarrass you. Clapton asked him to play at Crossroads, man. I don't need to say anything else. That's right. That should be your, if you had a business card, it would be Dave Biller, phone number. Clapton asked me to play at Crossroads. Fuck, seriously, man. That's you don't need any other testimony. You'll get hired. Just oh, okay. Are you available? Seriously, that's it, man. That's what I would do. When you're ready to design it, call me. I'll remind you of this. So Dave actually is available for lessons with a caveat. He works with intermediate to advanced students that are really looking for some practical application of theory. Maybe it's something you're struggling with. Maybe it's some jazz harmonies you want to incorporate into your playing, but he's available for that. And let me give you the website. It's D Biller, D as in David, Biller, Biller, 47, the number 47 lessons dbiller47@gmail.com. Again, it's dbiller, like his name, Dave Biller, 47.lessons@gmail.com. dbiller47.lessons@gmail.com. Just like, give him some background, what you're looking for, and, respect his time. He's super busy, and that's it, man. And if it's a fit, he'll get back with you. And if it's not, he'll yell at me for putting this out there. Hey, man, thank you for everything. I really appreciate it. I'd love to come see you play one day myself when I'm in Austin. I will definitely be knocking around looking for you. And if I can help you with anything here, let me know. And if you come out with a product, you come on this show, we'll promote it. All right?
Super. Thanks so much, Craig.
Thank you, Dave. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this interview, please share it with a friend on your social media channels. We certainly appreciate your support and help with this. Thanks again to Dave Biller for spending time with us. We certainly appreciate it. I do. And please support Dave and come check him out and see him play. And if Eric Clapton or who else was it that you were looking for? Jimmy Page, if you're listening, hook a brother up. I'll give you his number. Make sure you go to the homepage of everyonelovesguitar.com. Sign up to get on our newsletter list. And most important, remember that happiness is a choice, so choose wisely. Be nice, and go play your guitar, and have fun. Till next time, peace and love. I'm out, y'all. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.